One Tech Auto Hub concept, good reasons to get involved. Renault 5 for 2024 will be bi-directional electric, 911 on a 911, fleet work done better with ForWare, Garrett compressor, Koenigsegg Regera 400 kilometers an hour. Hello and welcome to this week's MotorZen News. This week, Devine, who is the Chief Commercial Officer for LKQ Euro Car Parts, spoke about their garage concept, their One Tech Auto Hub, and he posed the question why garage concept like theirs will help independent garages. Now, he started off with all the usual chat. The customer will get to recognise the One Tech Auto Hub brand. They'll recognise that brand for quality work. They'll be reassured by this brand. They'll see this brand as kite mark or ISO standard. He said that OEMs, franchise dealers, benefit from the fact they've got Ford or they've got Nissan or they've got Mercedes over the door. This brings benefits to them because, it gives those reassurances to the customer. In their concept, they say they've got benefits like bringing Shell, Paget, Valeo, Varta batteries, MPM oil, Schaeffler, ZF. All these brands are together helping you as an independent. Most of that stuff there about the quality and about the reassurance with the customer. Most well-run independent garages have that built up in their own name. And then usually in a lot of cases, the actual name of the owner of the garage that's over the door brings about all of that. So again, as I was reading the press release, I was saying, no, there's nothing new here, except until I come to the end and he speaks about EVs and new OEMs, new disruptors to the vehicle market. And this is why I say to some independents, they need to look at the garage concept scheme like One Tech Auto Hub, because these brands are coming to the market now. These EV brands, these OEMs are coming to the market now, and they're not traditional. They do not have a dealer network. They do not have a franchise workshop set up out there for the cars to go to. So somewhere along the line, these brands are going to want to partner up with workshops that will be able to look after these cars. Now, I don't see them going to each individual workshop in each individual town or city and trying to build relationships. They would like to probably plug into an already existing network. And I think what the Chief Commercial Officer from LKQ is talking about here now is really what I think that the whole idea of a garage concept is about, and the whole reason why you in your independent workshop might look at this. It's to try and attract that if you could group together all these independents under a banner, and that banner meant that these OEMs and these EV companies could get quality service and the same standard of service all over Ireland, all over the UK, they would be very interesting to do business with you. Another thing that he says too, which is, I think, these are the two most valuable points of the whole idea of One Tech Auto Hub. More and more people are leasing cars. The cars are belonging to leasing companies, not necessarily the car manufacturers, but external companies, and that these companies are looking around for partners to help them to service and support these cars also. And the fact that the general customer will no longer, or lesser numbers of people who will actually own their car in the conventional way, means that we have to find some way of attracting those type of vehicles into our workshop, and using the One Tech Auto Hub type garage scheme is another way of attracting that type of customer into a workshop. So in general, a lot of the earlier stuff on what he spoke about, I don't value very much. The latter stuff about linking in with these new manufacturers, linking in with the lease companies, I think that's interesting, and I think that's a reason why independents should look at concepts like One Tech Auto Hub. Renault are relaunching the Renault 5 in 2024. It's going to kind of stay with this type of styling of the old Renault 5, even though it's a completely new car that's just been called a Renault 5. Obviously, it's going to be pure electrical, but the interesting thing that's coming out from Renault is they say it's going to be the first bi-directional electric car in Europe. So it's going to allow you to charge from your home but it's also going to allow you to put energy from your car back into your home, so you can run your house off the car, and or also put energy back into the grid. Now they're saying you're going to need to have a special particular power box installed in your home. It's not a conventional charger installed at your home, but if this is installed, you can envisage the situation where you would charge your vehicle up on on off-tariff cheaper electricity, and you could put that electricity back into the grid when the tariff is at peak during the middle of the day, for example. So these are some of the interesting concepts that are coming out. They also say that the car is going to come with, well, an EU outlet, an EU plug socket outlet, which means in Britain and Ireland we're going to need another adapter to convert that, but maybe they're going to put the 3-pin plug outlet on it for Britain and Ireland. But really it's also going to mean that you can get 230, 240 electrical supply from the vehicle if you're doing some work in remote areas where there's no electricity as well. So a couple of interesting concepts being floated with the new Renault 5. So it's going to be interesting to see the car, and then it's going to be interesting to see these new innovations on the car. A funny story here for people who collect model cars. Usually collecting a model cars is rally cars, race cars, Formula 1 cars, famous events that they've won, famous drivers that use them. In this instance here, it's two cars. And they're not particularly famous cars, and they're not particularly famous drivers. They're from a 2015 Porsche Cup race in Spain. And the interesting thing is there's been a model made of the two cars. But in the footage you'll see that the reason that this is interesting is they're two 911s, and if you look at the shape of a 911, sometimes you think it's perfectly shaped like a ramp. Well, in this instance it became a ramp because as a result of an incident that occurred on the second corner, one 911 spun, another 911 ended up just sitting on the nose of the car, but also accelerated up the car and ended up getting stuck on the roof of the car. It's very funny to watch. While a model company has made a model, you can now buy a model of those two cars, one on top of the other. And I think it's one of the first times I've seen it that there's two cars now created around this model as opposed to one car traditionally. But they're famous, and they're famous for that particular incident that occurred in 2015 at a racetrack in Spain. What I find always interesting when I'm in and out of workshops is I speak to service managers, I speak to guys who run their own workshops, and I often ask them how are they getting on with fleet work and do they work for any fleet companies. And sometimes what comes back is, yeah, I do some work for them, but they're very hard to get paid off. And then I had occasion on sometimes to speak to some of the people on the fleet side, and they'll say, we don't really like dealing with them because they're very hard to get the correct invoicing off and the correct paperwork for the job. And then you begin to realise that there's a breakdown here between the communication on the service workshop side and the fleet management side. And in some instances this can be smaller independent workshops that are working for a company that have got a fleet of 20 or 30 vans, and the person in that office can't match up the quote that was given for the job with the invoice that came in for the job. Earlier in the week I spoke with a company that produces software around this. ForWare is the name of the company. Alan is the business development manager. And I had this conversation with him, and he says that's exactly what their product is about. They have their product in with many of the big brands, many of the big car brands, and they also have it in with many state bodies. But the issue to do with authorising work, getting the documentation correct, also what's happening now is that the lease companies or the fleets would like the workshop to monitor the vehicles in every way. In other words, monitor them for maybe weekly checks or 6-week checks or 12-week checks, but also flag up for them when they're due for NCT, when they're due for CVRT, or when they're due to be taxed, stuff like this. And it's quite an administrative task and can get really out of control if there isn't some kind of a system for it. Well, the ForWare system, and it's forware.io if you want to go online to have a look. They've just launched a new website. And if you are looking at some of this fleet work, it probably is really worth looking at this type of a platform, because you could find yourself in a situation where you're not getting paid for some invoices you've sent in, you're not getting any more work from the guys, and the relationship could be breaking down for no reason other than the fact that the communication lines have broken down. And really, if there's enough work going on here, the communication lines will break down. So you really do need to have a package to actually start to go into this. And I think there's a lot of work in these areas for workshops, organizations that are geared up correctly to do this. So it's ForWare.io, so if you want to have a look at that, it could be interesting to some people out there. Garrett, a brand name that we would know with traditional turbochargers, and it's interesting to watch some of these brands, because the moment I see the name I just completely associate them with traditional internal combustion engines and the turbocharger on an internal combustion engine. Well, Garrett have made a transition in the last number of years to electric compressors, and they're working very closely with BMW on their second generation iX5 hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Fuel cell being an on-demand electricity. So the electricity is generated on the vehicle according as the electricity is required. That's taking place via a chemical reaction between the hydrogen and oxygen. But the flow of air, the volume of air, the capacity of air, the pressure of the air going into this system is critically important. Obviously, it's very, very variable according to the demand of electricity required. So this is an area that Garrett is very involved with now. They produce 400 volt and 800 volt turbocharged compressors, effectively, as they call them. An interesting thing is they've got a patented oilless foil bearing system on these. This is a concept that they've developed now, so there's little or no maintenance required on it, and they're revving to 150,000 RPM. So it's going to be interesting to get more information on that foil bearing system and how it works as we try and learn more about these new technologies as we go on. Koenigsegg, the supercar manufacturer, their Agera is after breaking a new world record. The world record is for going from 0 to 400 kilometers an hour back to 0. They're after doing it in 28.1 seconds. They beat the Rimac Nevera, who held the record for only about a month. It was 29.5 or something like that they were doing. The system that Koenigsegg use is very, very interesting. When you looked at the headlines, they say it's a direct drive system. And when you look at this, you're thinking, well, how can it be direct drive? I mean, where does the revolution of the engine go? How do you process the revolution of the engine? When we got a bit more information about the system, what we discover is that there's a hybrid motor or electric motor driving the crank at the front of the engine, and there's 2 electric motors positioned on the rear drive shafts. In between the engine and the rear drive shaft is, in simple terms, a torque converter, but it's a much more complex thing than a torque converter. It's a system that allows you to, effectively, he says the vehicle really takes off in 7th gear, but with the way the torque converter works, it allows to convert all that power to torque for the takeoff, and it then brings in some of the electric motors at various different times, and then at a certain point it locks a clutch that's in the torque converter system, so you then have direct drive, you then have a direct mechanical drive, and whenever the conventional internal combustion engine starts to run out of puff, well, we think that's how it is, it then gives max input from the 3 electrical motors. So it's a very interesting, relatively simple but very interesting system, but in no way using any conventional transmission devices on this at all. There are some very good videos on it. Another interesting thing was the driver that broke the record also said that what contributed to him was the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 hours. They said they did this test, they beat their time from 15 or 16 when the car was first produced, and one of the reasons was that the tyre they used was a Cup 2, and they said that this tyre's performance was another reason that helped them, because you could get the performance of the vehicle down with this newer tyre that you couldn't have got on the older tyre. That's it for this week, guys. Again, our numbers are creeping up a wee bit week by week. And we're really enjoying it now, and we're really enjoying the fact that we're now meeting some people out there that are kind of watching our show each week, and as I go along around Ireland, I sometimes meet people and we start to have conversations and discussions about some of the topics, and that means we're getting to where we want to be. We just want to be a place that people go to once a week to get a little overview on what's going on in our industry. Thanks for that, and see you next week. Bye bye.